So in today's video, we're going to be going over the best Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet sets for Pokemon. So we're having all of the mainline sets and the special sets like Celebration, Shining Fates, Paldean Fates, etc. There's a lot of really great sets and there's a lot of really bad sets in both eras, so let's jump into it. First, let's look at the do not touch tier, right? So I wouldn't even touch these sets. I wouldn't buy into any of them, even if they're at a pretty decent price. I just think you're going to get much better bang for your buck when you go with the sets up the tier list. But the don't touch tier, at the top of the tier, I'm going to put Shining Fates actually. This is probably the least worst of the bunch. Shining Fates, right? It's a decent set that has a decent chase. But, after this Charizard, really, there's nothing else. A lot of these baby shinies just aren't really worth that much. They're not that popular. When you compare this to Hidden Fates and even Paldean Fates, this just really does not compare at all, right? Both of those sets are much deeper and have much better chases. So Shining Fates is going to be at the top of the do not touch tier for me. Next is Pokemon Go, same thing, right? There's so much better places to put your money. It has that Mewtwo chase, but it's not the greatest chase in the world. And after that, there's really not too much going on. Same thing with Vivid Voltage, right? It just has that Pikachu chase, but nothing else afterwards. These are sets that maybe have a subpar chase along with like zero depth. That's why they're in this do not touch tier, and that's why they're not going to be super desirable in the future. And I would much rather park my money somewhere else. Sword and Shield base, this is a set that's once again not super deep. It has that Snorlax VMAX, so it's decent. It has a decent chase, but once again, it's a base set. It's one of the weaker base sets in my opinion. It's weaker than Sun and Moon base, weaker than Scarlet and Violet base. It's just not something that a lot of people are super interested in. Same thing with Darkness Ablaze. This is even worse than all the other sets we've gone through. It just has that Charizard VMAX, right? Regular Charizard VMAX, not even an alternate art, and that's it, right? There's nothing else. And Rebel Clash, I would say Rebel Clash is probably the worst place to put your money. So that rounds out our do not touch tier. I think most people would agree with this. The next tier is going to be the buy one box tier, and I'm actually going to put Battle Styles at the top of this tier list. Now you might be wondering why, right? Why are you putting Battle Styles, which is a notoriously terrible set, right? A lot of people hate Battle Styles, but I'm actually here to tell you that Battle Styles I think is slightly underrated. Now that might be a hot take, I don't know, but I think, with the Sleeping Tyranitar, with the Empoleon, with the Urshifus, with the Mimikyu, right? I think this is a pretty underrated set, especially for its price point, right? You can pick this up, a booster box of this for about $200. Sometimes you can find it even cheaper for maybe $180, $190, and I think that's honestly a pretty underrated pickup. Now, would I pick up a case of this? Absolutely not. If I find one booster box of this for a decent price under $200, I'm open to picking it up. I think this Tyranitar V alternate art is super undervalued. This is the first ever alternate art card, right? This is the first ever alternate art set in Sword and Shield, and this Tyranitar is only $182, right? It's a lot cheaper than all of the other, really high tier alternate arts that we've had in Sword and Shield, right? It's under the Lugia, it's under the Charizard V from Brilliant Stars, it's under basically like most of the alternate arts. Just this Tyranitar alone will keep the set afloat and keep it, much higher than the do not touch, right? I definitely like the Tyranitar, and just because of that, I like Battle Styles as a one box investment. Next is Obsidian Flames. This once again is going into the buy one box tier. Obsidian Flames, it has that Charizard chase, it has a few pretty good illustration rares, but after that it really falls off. It's just a buy one box for me, and it's already pretty expensive now. It's at like $240, $250. I would much rather buy Surging Sparks for $250 rather than Obsidian Flames for $250. Next is Stellar Crown. This once again is buy one box. This only has the Squirtle and the Bulbasaur chase. There's nothing else that's super desirable in that set, right? Maybe the Terapagos, but these are basically sets that maybe have one or two decent chases along with subpar depth, and all three of these sets, right, they have one or two good chases, but then pretty terrible cards after that. Scarlet and Violet base set is a set that doesn't have a great chase, right? It's the Gardevoir line, but I wouldn't really call that a top tier chase, and it has some decent depth, but compared to some of the sets in the few boxes, case, and buy as much as possible tiers, I would say it definitely falls in line with the buy one box. And finally, we have Champion's Path. Now this is one of those sets that I do think it has a pretty good chase. It has that Rainbow Charizard, it has that shiny Charizard full arts, But after that, there's really not much else going for Champion's Path. Currently, all the sets on the screen I own very, very little of. I own a little bit of Champion's Path. That's just because I got it at retail price. But, I think you have time to pick these up. I wouldn't really rush into any of these positions right now. But going into the buy a few boxes tier, I would definitely consider picking some of these up, right? Especially Celebrations. Now, I have Celebrations at the top of the buy a few boxes tier. I think you should definitely get a few of these ETBs if possible. If you can find them for maybe 10% under market price, I would definitely pick up Celebrations right now. The 30th anniversary is coming up next year, and with these anniversary sets, especially the 25th anniversary, we're going to get another rise in these prices as we get nearer to the deadline of the anniversary. And Celebrations is a pretty decent set, honestly. Let's take a look at the set list. This set was, it got a lot of slack when it first came out. A lot of people didn't like the stamps. A lot of people thought the set list was too small. And I do agree, the set list is quite small, but we still have some really, really good looking cards, right? A lot of these are reprints, but we do have the original base set Charizard reprint, right? Very, very iconic card. We have the Umbreon Gold Star, probably the most valuable Gold Star that has ever been produced, and we have this as a reprint, right? A very widely accessible version of the Gold Star. We have the Mega Rayquaza EX, right? One of the best cards of XY. We have the Shining Magikarp. We have the Zekrom, right? A lot of very iconic cards in this Celebration set that got reprints. Look at something like Generations, right? Generations was also a hated on set for a very long time, and look how well that is doing. I think Celebrations can definitely follow in the footsteps of Generations, which is the 20th anniversary set, and I think you should definitely have a little bit of Celebrations in your collection, right? Do I think you should go all in on Celebrations? Probably not, right? Especially now since the prices are a little bit more inflated than a few months ago. But I definitely think, right, in that 200 to 250 range, picking up an ETB is not a bad idea at all. Next is Twilight Masquerade, and this once again is going into the buy a few boxes tier. I think this is a pretty decent set. There is a slight risk for reprints. I do think this set could come down in the short term if we do get a reprint. Overall, long term, right, the Greninja is going to carry the set as the top chase card, and it has a lot of depth with the rest of the trainers, the SIRs, and the IRs. Next up is Astral Radiance. I would definitely consider getting a few boxes of this, especially since this is now the cheapest trainer gallery set for booster boxes, right? You have Silver Tempest, you have Lost Origin, and you have Brilliant Stars, all three of which are more expensive than Astral Radiance now. So yeah, Astral right now is at a pretty good price, about that $380 range for booster boxes. Definitely pick up a few if you can find them for a good deal. Journey Together, this is probably going to be buy a few boxes as well. Journey Together was, pretty hated on when it came out, but if you really look at the set list, right, it has really good cards, just not a lot of depth, right? After the first 5, 6, 7 cards, it really falls off a cliff, right? The total set value isn't super high. It's only like 600 or 700. So great cards, but just not a lot of depth. But I think it'll age pretty nicely, especially since it has a box topper for the booster boxes, and since, it could get a smaller reprint than something like Destined Rivals or Surging Sparks that are more popular. This could be one of the sets that misses a massive reprint. So definitely keep your eye out on Journey Together. And now we get to the dark horse contenders for Scarlet and Violet, and those are going to be Temporal Forces and Paradox Rift. I think both of these sets, in my opinion, fall under the same category as very underrated because they contain Pokemon that maybe aren't as popular today, but could be very popular in the future, right? Paradox Rift has a lot of the newer Pokemon. Temporal Forces has basically all of its top chases as those new future and ancient Pokemon. So these are sets that I think have a lot of depth, right? Great depth, but just maybe not the top tier chases right now, but maybe in the future they could have top chases. And lastly, we have Shrouded Fable. Now, this might be a surprise to you guys, right? Why isn't this in the buy one box tier or maybe even the don't touch tier? Quite frankly, I think Shrouded Fable is an extremely underrated set for 2 reasons. The first reason is that Shrouded Fable has some of the best illustration rares in all of Scarlet and Violet. It has this Persian, it has this Houndoom, it has the Duskull, Dusknoir, and Dusclops line. It has the Horsea, it has the Cresselia, it has the Zora, the Beware, the Q-Fence. It has a lot of really good illustration rares, and a lot of them are over, $20, right? We have Dusclops, Dusknoir, Munkidori, Duskull, Houndoom, and Persian, right? A lot of these illustration rares are very expensive, and they only come in this set. And secondly, this set could be one of those sets that does not get a reprint, right? Pokemon knows that Shrouded Fable, like I'm sure they see the data, right? Shrouded Fable is not a great seller, and they see that data. They're most likely not going to reprint this over something like Prismatic or Surging Sparks or Destined Rivals, right? They would much rather print those sets than Shrouded Fable. So even though this set has only been out for a year, right, it could completely miss out on a reprint, which could make this set a lot scarcer than those other sets. The next tier is going to be buy a case, and I would say the first set is going to be Chilling Reign, right? I made a video on Chilling Reign recently, so I won't go too much into it, but basically Chilling Reign has the second highest total set value in Sword and Shield. It has a top chase card in the Blaziken VMAX, but its booster box right now is so undervalued. So if you can find a case of booster boxes, I would totally go into Chilling Reign right now. I think it's super undervalued. Paldea Evolved is going to be my next pick. I would say Paldea Evolved is going to be a top 3 booster box easily of SV, right? I think the top 3 are going to be Destined Rivals, Paldea Evolved, and Surging Sparks, and that's also why I'm having Surging Sparks here. Now I have Paldea Evolved above Surging Sparks because Paldea is most likely not going to get another reprint, right? Even if it does, it's most likely not going to be booster boxes, and it's probably going to be booster bundles, blisters, etc. And Surging Sparks, it already got that reprint, so its reprint risk I would say is medium right now. We could still see another smaller reprint for booster boxes down the line, maybe 6 months, a year later, but the reprint risk for Surging Sparks is getting lower by the day, which is good. The next 2 sets are going to be Brilliant Stars and Silver Tempest. I would say both of these sets are around the same category, right? They have a top chase card in the Lugia and also the Charizard V for Brilliant Stars, and they have decent depth, right? Brilliant Stars has the Umbreon, the Sylveon, and the Mimikyus for the trainer galleries. Silver Tempest has the Blaziken and the Rayquaza for the trainer galleries. Both of these are still relatively cheap right now. You can still find them for just around that $400 or maybe even slightly under $400 range. So I would definitely be picking up cases of these if you can find it for maybe 5 to 10% under market. And the last one in this tier is going to be Black Bolt White Flare for me. This isn't finalized because we need the prices to really settle down for Black Bolt White Flare, and I would rank both of them, in this buy a case tier. I wouldn't really rank Black Bolt or White Flare too much higher or too much lower. I think both of them are very comparable sets. Of course, Black Bolt has the Seismitoad. White Flare also has some other really great illustration rares, but we just need more time for the set to mature. But right now, the total set value for each of these is about 3,000 still, which is pretty crazy. If that continues, maybe a year, 2 years down the line, if the total set value is still that high and we don't see too many reprints of Black Bolt White Flare, right? If this is a less printed set, I could definitely see this going up into the top tier, right? Buy as much as possible because, quite frankly, I think this is pretty overlooked right now. A lot of people are kind of overlooking Black Bolt White Flare. They're kind of skipping this set and going into the Mega Evolution set and the following sets after that, and they're really kind of looking over this. They're looking past Black Bolt White Flare. Even though I think the cards in the set look amazing, it's just a lot of people don't like this generation, right? The black and white generation, but in the future, right, that's not really going to matter if the cards in the set are still super valuable. Lastly, we have the buy as much as possible tier. Now, how am I going to rank this, right? I haven't really thought this through, but I would say Evolving Skies still has to be number 1. Evolving Skies is just such a strong set. It's basically the team up of Sword and Shield, and I would say it's probably even better than any set in Scarlet and Violet. If I had to pick what single Pokemon set defined, the last 5 years of the TCG, I would say it's definitely Evolving Skies. This is the most iconic set by far out of all of these sets. So yeah, I think Evolving Skies easily at number 1. There's not too much else to say about Evolving Skies. The next set in this top tier, I'm going to say is going to be 151. Now, I talk about iconic, I talk about nostalgia, right? 151 has all of that and even more, right? This is one of the most iconic sets we've ever had. Right now, 151, you still have like 6 or 7 months until it goes out of rotation, so you still have some more time to pick it up at a cheap price, right? Right now, 151 is only about $10 a pack, and I can easily see this getting to upwards of $50 to $100 a pack 5 to 10 years down the line. I think the price that 151 is right now is such a no-brainer play, and I am currently buying as much 151 as possible. The next one we have is going to be Prismatic Evolutions. I think this is one of the most no-brainer sets to invest in. Right? I've talked about Prismatic so much in some of my other videos, but in my opinion, ETBs and PC ETBs are going to be, buy as much as possible right now, especially PCETBs, right? I can definitely see PCETBs hitting over $300 very soon, because they're not really going to get reprinted. They are actually restocking on the Pokemon Center probably next week, right? I'll keep you guys updated, but if they do, right, we'll see a short-term dip in the price, and then it's going to shoot up again right after that. So these next couple of weeks are going to be your prime opportunity to pick up Prismatic Evolution PCETBs. But overall, right, this I would say is a top 3, top 2 set in both Sword and Shield and SV combined. So it's an absolute no-brainer for me. Next up is going to be Paldean Fates. I'm putting Paldean Fates right below Prismatic, and I think it's actually being overlooked right now. It has the Bubble Mew, it has the Charizard, it has the Gardevoir, and it has really, really deep baby shinies. And if Paldean Fates does not get a reprint, this set is going to absolutely explode, right? It only has about 6 more months left of being in rotation, and if it doesn't get that reprint, especially for its ETBs, this set will go absolutely ballistic. This is probably the most overlooked set in all of Scarlet and Violet. I see no one talking about how good Paldean Fates is. Everyone's talking about 151, everyone's talking about Destined Rivals, everyone's talking about Paldea Evolved, but it seems like no one's really giving Paldean Fates the credit it deserves. So I do think Paldean Fates is going to shock a lot of people when it eventually goes out of print in about 6 months. The next couple of sets are going to be some Sword and Shield sets, so I would put Crown Zenith up here, I would put Fusion Strike right after it, and I'll put Lost Origin right after that. I think these are the 3 best Sword and Shield sets right after Evolving Skies. Crown Zenith, right, it was printed a lot. We got to see in Skyboxes, we got the ETBs, got multiple reprints of ETBs, but I think right now, since it's out of print, and since Crown Zenith is getting harder and harder to find in the wild, I think right now is probably your last chance before this shoots up to $20-$30 a booster pack. And same thing with Fusion Strike, right? Fusion Strike has already gone up a lot now. Booster boxes are like $800-$900 now. But I definitely think Fusion Strike is one of those boxes that's going to be a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 booster box down the line, in a couple of years. So if you want to really have one in your collection, the clock is ticking. You definitely want to take the opportunity to get into Fusion Strike now. And same thing with Lost Origin, right? This is basically approaching $600 to $700 a booster box now. If you really want Lost Origin in your collection, right now is probably your best bet before this goes, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, because this will definitely hit those numbers given enough time. And lastly, we have Destined Rivals. Now, Destined Rivals, in my opinion, is going to be the best booster box set of SV, and I could even see this being, the number 2 or maybe even number 1 set of Scarlet and Violet, right? I know that sounds crazy, but historically, booster box sets have always performed better than their special set counterparts, right? In Sun and Moon, right, we have something like Team Up performing the best out of all of the sets, while we had, pretty good special sets like Hidden Fates and even Shining Legends. In XY, we have something like Flashfire performing the best, even though we have other really good special sets like Generations. So I think Destined Rivals does have that slight chance of being that number 1 set, even above Prismatic and 151. But right now it's just too soon to say. We don't know how much of a reprint Destined Rivals is going to get, because it will get a reprint. We just don't know how much. And right now it's just too early, right? The set's only been out for 3 months. But definitely, if you can find this for 10% under market, 20% under market, I would definitely pick up Destined Rivals while you can, because there's a lot of unknowns with Destined Rivals, so it's a little bit more risky. But if you have the capital and if you're willing to hold this set for 5+ years, you really can't go wrong with picking it up, even at $300, guys. If you're in this for the long term, you can't go wrong with any of these sets in the top tier, and even in the buy a case tier, right? I would say anything above the buy a few boxes tier, so anything, here and above, I would say you can't go wrong with it. And anything below, right, there's a little bit more risk because these aren't as desirable. There's going to be less liquidity. But anything above the buy a few boxes, you're going to have a pretty easy time selling them down the line, and these are going to be multiple hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for booster boxes, and probably, $1,000+ for the ETBs eventually as well. This is just my personal opinion, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this tier list and what you would change, and I'll see you guys in the next one.